30 minutes away, but
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, tell her, sounds good, period. I'm recording a shoe
We're
video with a friend of mine. So in case that you come in, comma, and I'm talking, comma, that's why. There we go. Okay, cool. So,
no, that's all right. What's up, man? Yeah, so we are live now. I'm just checking to see if this is working. But yeah, so if anybody's out there watching, let us know how the audio is coming through. The and actually while I'm on the I was just looking and I was like, I wonder who it is that's watching, but I think it might be me that's watching. But whoever's out there, let us know if the audio sounds good.
how self-referential of you.
Yeah, we got a thumbs up, so it's
Yeah,
not just me that's
cool.
watching.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm not
Awesome.
watching. I'm just hoping it all works out.
So we are Ashwin Welted Wear on Instagram and YouTube, right? Yeah.
You
Sometimes
got
I
it.
I get
Yeah, a
that
little bit of
confused,
both.
but I don't know
Yeah.
why. I don't really get it confused. I just have a terrible name and face, but I just think of Ashwin and then the rest
Yeah, yeah.
falls
No,
into place.
I'm glad you think of me as Ashwin and not just welted wear.
Yeah. More than just like your social media
I'm just
presence.
my Instagram handle. So, hello to everybody who's watching. I hope you all are doing well. And
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We
what are we
were
talking about?
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say we started talking about it a little before, and then I think I was like, well, why are we can just like start
Yeah.
going
Let's
live,
record.
I guess. But yeah, I was thinking like um so like we both started mainly with Instagram, or at least I did. That's how I really got a lot of
Mhm.
my information and exposure to different shoemakers. And I feel like today it just sucks compared to how it was. And like um there's not like I can't even like scroll through Instagram for more than a few minutes looking at shoe content without just
Yeah.
completely losing interest in it, because there's not that same quality of content or just like uh
Yeah. I know a lot of
dynamic of
people are.
Instagram.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are trying this new, reels or video format, and like for some reason on my main account, I'm really annoyed because Instagram has switched to like this dark format. It almost looks like the app is in dark mode, but it's specifically for people who are like creators and whatever, and supposed to support video content. But I don't know, like you, I kind of started on my shoe journey largely through Instagram for a number of reasons. One, some of the makers that I like were posting obviously photos. A lot of enthusiasts, like everybody who's probably on this video, kind of were showing their own shoes. And then some people like you were stepping up their game and really making artistic presentation of their shoes. And like, I honestly often get more out of like seeing things, at least at first blush, like having a shoe presented so I can actually see the shape of the shoe. And, if there's like reels with all these little clips of video and like images spliced together, I don't know. The content is not great for me. So I still kind of go back to the more traditional, like people who are doing it more old school, because I just find it to be more valuable. And a lot of people have their businesses based off of Instagram. Like half of the makers we talk about pretty much just do their business on Instagram, which makes it even more challenging to figure out where to get your content.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think so. Like I've been making reels more so just because the photo side of things can get stale, but just if you're doing the same thing over and over again for a while, like it is easy to kind of get complacent, or just
Yeah,
kind of
getting it
like
right.
get in the habit of doing like taking the same photo or a couple of photos, and then that's kind of it. So I was like, why not just like I enjoy like making videos, so why not just try and do it and see how it works out. And a lot of times I mean for the most part I enjoy it, but like when I look at what I have to when I look at like what I create that actually like ends up doing well, it's nothing that's informative. It's simply just
Yeah,
like how can you like make like
it's
a
more
series of
consumer
like
based.
2 or 3 second clips, like continually switch so that you don't like lose someone's attention and it kind of
Well, I
blows up.
mean,
But like there's no
yeah,
value in it where if you get that single picture that really like shows off the details, you can actually consume that. You don't get
yeah.
that in reels.
Well, I think you're one of the few people who's the way you're presenting things are artfully done. You're showing the shoes with them on your feet. You're kind of showing stills. You're using different lighting setups. which is cool. Most people, I don't think, have that skill set to be able to do it. And so taking a photo, whether you're, your mirrorless or your SLR or even your iPhone, honestly, like can often give more people more. And like it then leaves this sort of communication or content gap where we're trying to figure out more about brands that like are emerging, and you're like left with a resource that's kind of diminished, I guess. Other than if for somebody in your situation, like I hope that the way that Instagram's working is driving people to your content just because it is actually more valuable. But then it's really specifically a small handful of people who are actually able to do that level of work.
Yeah. And the other thing that's so like they're not like it's and I mean I'm not like complaining, but I mean when I like look at the volume of traffic that I get today, like even like last month it was like crazy high, and like this month
Mhm.
nothing's changed, but it's crazy low, and that's just kind of how it
Yeah.
is. But like this is the kind of stuff that like drives me crazy is like I don't follow these people. But
Yeah.
this, if you like look, if you are just like on the explore page, and now we're
Yeah.
just kind of going on like Instagram rants, but that's fine. We can change the topic in a second. Like that's all you see, and like I know you
Yeah.
can stop the suggestions, but then you still get. It's not like the old like chronological timeline. It's
Yeah.
just something that like I look at. I enjoy camera content, audio content, so I start
Yeah.
looking at that, and then all of a sudden, like if I look at a few of this person's posts, like they all of a sudden like show up in my feed. Which I mean, I
What's
get why and how it works, but like it's
well,
just
it's
annoying
really
because you have to consciously
yeah,
avoid looking at stuff that you might be interested in because it could throw off the stuff that
it
you
could throw off
actually
your
want to see.
algorithm. What's interesting, I was talking to, I take care of a college and pro athletes, and at the college level, a lot of my athletes are kind of dealing with the whole name, image, likeness thing, where they're trying to become marketable. And they specifically, a number of them who are more involved with NIL are saying, it's Instagram is like a horror show because for the exact reasons you talk about. If there's no consistency, and if you kind of click the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, it may just your audience might completely divert somewhere else. And so a lot of them are going. I've never had a TikTok account, but like a lot of people are in that age bracket are going to TikTok, which is kind of interesting because it comes with its own challenges and things like that. And so I think ultimately, the question is, where do you get good shoe content now? Like, where do you go to find information about like new makers or brands, or like how do you do that? And I'm honestly struggling with it a little, so I'm trying to figure out. It's nice to
Yeah,
kind of hash it out and figure that out because we need to do that to kind of keep the level of content high. I often think we're in like this golden era of shoemaking, and like the mix of being able to access people all over the world and communicate with them through any number of ways. Like there's some real benefits to how social media works. And I'm in touch with people who are making shoes in everywhere from Vietnam to Brazil to Indonesia to China to Italy. Like that's kind of nuts, but and kind of awesome, but it's also like it's challenged by some of these sort of fast moving social media phenomena and like how Instagram is like kind of devolving in some ways. So
yeah. And let me. So I've got like a few. This is I've never been on. I've only been on Reddit on my phone, so this
mm,
is completely different.
yeah, I'd be curious in the comments how many people use Reddit because it is an area that I've been very, very curious. Oh, by the way, I see Kenwin's on, so I wanted to say hi to Kenwin and thanks to Seth. And some people mentioned Style Forum as well as another place where you can really get great content and learn a lot
Uh,
about shoes.
Man, I am completely like slacking here. There we go. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I was watching the wrong comment, so thank you for that, Ashwin. But
yeah.
yeah,
So yeah,
so
Reddit, and I haven't used Reddit. I mean, I've only used Reddit for the occasional. Like, I found that the reviews on Reddit for shoes and boots, I tend to end up for boots there more like randomly. Like, I find whatever I'm interested in, an Underhood review or something like that, and I find like essentially like a Imgur, like a link to a art,
yeah,
a set of photos, and then
the
like
image like
yeah, the
carousel
image
or
thing,
whatever in Imgur, right?
yeah. And then yeah, okay, interesting. So some people are talking more about like the Goodyear Welt subreddit and all of these types of things. I find that the reviews there are very short though. There tend to be like user reviews, usually first experience reviews, where you're like, hey, I just unboxed these and I might have put them on my foot once or twice. Occasionally people will come back and do like a month or 3 month or whatever 6 month follow-ups, but um, like I say, I'm just not as familiar with it. So
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, is the so like I was just looking at, and I see what you're saying. Like, there's a lot of activity or a lot of like comments about Reddit style forum, style. So like my thing, and maybe it's just a
I'd be curious about your thoughts on style forum.
yeah, and that's what I was say. Like, I don't know if it's just having to get used to it, but the style form user experience is awful.
Yeah.
Like
Well, there's probably a
I can
better
never find
for
what I'm looking for there.
yeah, no. You almost have to. This is the challenge I have. For some of you, probably know that I'm into photography, and that doesn't really come across in my Instagram. But like, I do a fair bit of
That's
um,
a
high level photography outside of my shoes, I guess, and maybe it comes through more in some of my videos. But a lot of the place I initially 15 years ago got my information about Leica cameras and that's sort of what I shoot are via the equivalent of Reddit back then. There was a place called Leica User Forum that still exists, but it was literally having to like data mine and try. And I find the same thing with Style Forum is like you're having to dig around and maybe you find a couple people you like as content experts and then you reach out to them, but it's not super efficient. It's just not a very efficient way to go.
yeah. The so like with Reddit, the only experience that I really have with Reddit is if I'm googling something and the Reddit like a Reddit like subthread uh pops up and actually has like the content that I'm looking for, I'll go right there. But I've never, and I honestly haven't put too much effort into it. But it just
Yeah.
feels it's a different type of platform than like Instagram.
Yeah.
It's more along the lines of I guess like style form where you're following a certain like series of conversations or topics, and like that's where you
Yeah.
stay, which I think is good and bad. But the um but yeah, I mean, it's something that maybe I have to try a little bit
Yeah.
more. I'm actually curious, and this is I don't even know the answer to this, but like I think you said you have um some experience with Discord, right?
Yeah, so that's an interesting experience that I've had. The boot community, at least the people who are into sort of, I guess, elevated, almost fashion forward boots is that's not really fair, but like because there's a lot of people into workwear boots and others are on the stitchdown.com Discord. I know you're starting a Discord as well, sort of focusing on well made kind of
Trying.
things, like which I think will be really cool once that takes off. But I think a model for that is the Stitchdown Discord. And, it's kind of it's organized by stitchdown.com. It's like Ben Robinson and Patrick Gessner's like thing. And they started, or he started it. And, it's got a pretty vibrant community. I think it's got like several thousand members, and they had that whole Patina Thunderdome thing where they're kind of a shoe aging contest, and I think 400 or 500 people signed up for it, and about 300 made it through. And the bottom line is, it's a nice place where people are like trying to figure out like how do I size my boots. Like a lot of us have like one brand, and somebody might have the other brand also along with the brand that you have, so you can kind of compare sizing. Like Alden, for example, is a really nice standard for both shoes and boots because their lasts have been around for a long time. Almost everybody knows what their sizing is on a Berry
Yep.
last or True Balance last. Some people like know the Grant, all these other lasts, and so you can kind of be like, hey, I'm a Berry blah blah blah. What would I be in Onderhood, Buteo last? And there's going to be somebody there that literally comments within 35 seconds because they get alerts. Everybody gets alerts about it. So I like it, but it also is, if you're trying to go back in like archivally into Discord and try to figure out, information from the past, it's not really designed for that. It's more of like an ongoing dialogue. It's like having a bunch of people in a room and they're all talking about shoes. And the conversation kind of leads and winds to like whatever people are talking about. And then there's all these different channels within the Discord where if you're really interested in like new makeups for shoes, or you're really interested in a certain brand, like I know a lot of people like Viberg there. But like that kind of stuff, like you can kind of get a sub, so I probably assume like a subreddit going there. So it's a
You
cool,
can
I mean,
have a nice Discord.
yeah, yeah, you can have a really nice Discord. I think it's a cool community. I've actually used it largely to like, kind of look at different people's ideas on boots, and sizing things are super helpful. But I find it a little less helpful if I'm trying to know more about like a certain, like I'm trying to like study something, like, hey, I want to kind of look at this style or this makeup or this leather. You can kind of get some of that information, but it's really, the stitch on is very much targeting people who are into like, Viberg slash Alden slash all of the other like boot makers that kind of have built up around that kind of industry, like the Indonesian guys, the Flame Pandas.
Yeah,
It's more for that. And though I will say that there's some people there that cross into dress shoes, and like I saw a pair of, I think you saw these, a pair of Zeb shoes come up like recently, and I got them for like, I mean, I don't, it's a crime what I paid for them. Like it was
I don't
so
even
such a
remember.
good,
It was cheap. But I don't
it was
remember.
like $200, so shipped to my door for like a pair of shell cordovan ivy wood, which I think you mentioned is like a
Yeah,
Ravello shell cordovan, short wing, sort of chonky, almost looks like a long wing bleacher, but as a short wing, and by Zeb, who's like kind of this Croatian, like under the radar shoemaker who does it as like a hobby and is super cool and kind of crosses into both shoes and boots. And so you can occasionally score incredible deals depending on where you are.
yeah. I was trying to pull these up here now, but yeah, I mean it's so like the thing with Discord, and actually I was like thinking of trying it was the where tell me where am I did I scroll past it? Um, the Ivywood ones, but
Yeah, yeah. So
here
that's a
they are.
perfect example. Like, I really struggle with trying to figure out what the heck is going on with Horween shell cordovan nomenclature, like naming the different leathers. Like, like Carmina has mainly Horween shell. Obviously, Alden has Horween shell, and then some of the distributors like Rocky Mountain or AA Crack or others, they all have different shells. Largely from Horween, but from a few other companies. And then they're some of the names, like the Alden has like their own nomenclature. So does Carmina. So like a ruby shell cordovan, some people call it color 2. I'm not even sure if it is,
Yeah,
actually a diluted color 8. Like that's the kind of information it would be nice to centralize, or at least have some level of consistency about, because it's all over. Ivywood is Ravella is Middleborough, like they're all the same thing, right? Ish. Like, but it's confusing
yeah.
to me.
It's it's uh it's difficult at just in general because there's not a lot of transparency. So like even when you around certain things, but like even when you hear the input from folks that maybe have gone to Horween or work
Yeah.
there, and they're like, yeah, like Middleborough
Yeah.
and Rebella are the same thing, but Middleborough is a name that's accessible to people outside of
Yeah.
Alden.
That
Then
might
it's like,
be,
well,
yeah.
that makes sense, but where are there like reliable photos of
Yeah,
Middleborough to
you almost
compare
have
it?
to know somebody at Horween, like,
Yeah,
like the Ashland Leather guys, to like help sort it out, or like reach out to Nick Horween on Instagram, where like where we're running into the same issues we had before, where they're like, hey, it'd be really nice to have some sort of centralized, thing. But I think all of us kind of find these different resources that we get into. And for me, I'm a visual guy, so like a lot of my appreciation for shoes comes from like looking at you know a consistent resource for what like I know what Antonio Macariello's shoes are going to look like. I kind of know what Thunder March's shoes are going to look like. I certainly know what your content is going to look like. And so that's both good and bad, because I know that you guys are going to present your shoes in a very kind of nice way, in a sort of artful way, but it's also like you guys are good at taking photos and video, and I'm trying to
yeah,
figure out how to like sift through that and figure out what actually I would like in terms of like a makeup, a last, whatever. I've been having a really nice conversation with another kind of YouTube shoe enthusiast who's kind of has a popular channel, and he's going into Dave from Vintage Future. I don't know if he might watch this later on, but it's boots of mannish leather,
yeah,
which is for those of you who are interested in like good boot content. He does a really good job of sitting down and just talking through like shoes and boots. And I mean, obviously, we all have our biases and what our interests are, but like he's also like thinking a little bit more about elevated dress shoes. So he reached out to me because we have a kind of a relationship via the Stitch Down Discord and a few other things. And he actually reached out about your shoes because he was like, "Hey, I really like shelf edges stuff, but I don't really know them, and I'm trying to figure out like how to even." He's like, "I don't even know where to start with some of this stuff because it's like all of us appreciate these really like." I think all of us, we kind of, you and I have had this conversation. We like appreciate well made things, and having a well made boot is actually slightly different than having a well made shoe. But where you figure that out is like almost impossible to figure out. Like somebody like Onderhood is going to make something very different than somebody like um, Acme Showmaker. They're both based out of like, they're both based in East Asia. They
Yeah.
both are considered really high quality makers, but I bet if you took apart their processes, it'd be pretty dramatically different.
Yeah, like and I was trying to find this. There's I'm gonna butcher this name, but Scoti Bulliget. They
Yeah, yeah,
Bulliget,
yeah, yeah.
close enough, right? They
They're like a shoe store in like Sweden or something like that, right?
yeah,
Squatty Bo.
Stockholm.
Yeah,
Is it Stockholm?
yeah.
I think. Um, but they had this like good page where they kind of showed some of the different colors of cordovan. And I don't know.
Oh,
I can try and find it, but
yeah.
uh, yeah. I mean, it's the I think it's really just like the appreciation of something that you care for and kind of grows with you.
Mm,
Whereas like you kind of buy, like a mass produced shoe or boot or even like a boat shoe or a sandal. Like sometimes that just makes the most sense to do. But there's a seasonality or there's like a lifespan that's kind of associated with those things. Whereas when you buy something like this, like we're kind of hoping and expecting it to be with us as long as we really want it to be. Like
yeah,
it could kind of get ruined early, but if we are like this is something that we want to have for the rest of our lives, like we could make that happen. Like it's something that would functionally survive that long. And
yeah.
I think there's something like special about that because at least for me, like growing up, like there wasn't a lot of it was there were some things like that and those things that we like get are like special, but it kind of completely turned away from that type of consumerism. I don't know if that's like the right, but so I think it's like kind of some of us are like looking to kind of go back into that direction, but it's hard to
Yeah,
this I was looking at this question from I got before I like messed up his name, Goodyear welded guy, and
yeah. Really good comment there, actually, about
yeah,
the challenges of identifying like consistency with sizing and like having a certified, like almost like a certification process, like about like, hey, I want to kind of make, I think part of it's just, at least from sizing, is challenging. We all have slightly different feet, and like they're generically kind of, they're sort of similar enough, but like there's also a lot of differences once you get into the shapeliness of dress shoes, and like kind of make, my Brannick 10-ish foot is probably a little different than the next person's, and so like, but it would still be super helpful to like have some sort of centralized data bank on some of this important information.
yeah. I wonder one of the things trying to think of the best streaming. It doesn't really matter, I guess, with the
Yeah.
example, but like just the general. And this was actually part of the article from Jesper, I think that I talked about in a video a couple weeks ago. Was like just because a width is listed a certain way or a length, like it doesn't necessarily equal the same width or the same like fit because like a very say something that's like 10 centimeters wide, but has a very like shallow vamp versus
Yeah.
something that maybe is centimeters wide and has a much like more spacious vamp. Like those are going to fit your foot differently, and the one
Yeah.
that's narrower may actually have more like fitting room for your foot than the one that is wider with like a shallower vamp. So there's so
Totally.
many different like factors that go into it. Um,
Yeah, like where
it's
does the arch, like, you can imagine you might have an arch in your foot, even though you measure at a Brannick 10 or whatever. I'm a Brannick 10, but if I measured at a Brannick whatever, you might have an arch that's sort of a Brannick 11, like where it should fit, you know what I mean? Like, and
yeah,
there's so many of these different things that could factor in. It becomes super super interesting and trying to figure out how to make it work, which is where I think people end up going into these like subreddits or the discords or whatnot to say, hey, here is my size in these 15 brands. And you can imagine there could be some algorithm that sits out there and says pretty much whatever 7 billion people on earth are wearing, most of them are wearing shoes, or at least a large portion of them are. You would think that there's some normative data we can get and like make some decisions about decent
Yeah.
shoes, you know, that are meant to last a lifetime at least.
Yeah, I mean, because that's what like this article, it was talking about how like what the instep is, and this is actually like really common, I guess, is like people
Mhm.
not mixing up, but people using the term instep and arch like interchangeably.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and it makes sense on the shoe side because normally like when you talk about like I have a tall arch,
Yeah.
you're in one way or another talking about the fitting of your instep as well as
Yep.
the arch. But yeah, so just kind of like that's kind of like what this part was calling out. But then I think like a little further down was the part about the width, which I mean for me like there are a lot of shoemakers like Mecariello, his shoes always look like really narrow, but like the height of his toe box and Vamp, um, like not
Accommodates in
yeah,
different
I was gonna say
ways.
not like mitigates it, but it makes a very like sleek and narrow looking shoe very fit, very accommodating from a fit perspective because
Yeah.
there's a number of measurements that really like go into that, and then you have to try and solve for like how do you convey all of that in in a tool or in a like a repository of
Yeah.
sizing.
Yeah, totally. I'm thinking about this Dave, who I've been chatting with recently, and a few others I've had sort of these conversations with, is like, hey, like we all have certain levels of experience, and then it kind of boils down to like connecting with others who have lots of experience, which then puts more pressure on somebody like you who has a lot of experience on the
I just
highest end of.
refuse to answer. No.
Yeah, but you know, I feel like there's like a certain element of like when somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, what's the fit like on this? I'm happy to try to answer, but I kind of feel bummed out if my fit is different than their foot. You know what I mean? Like their fit. And it's happened before where I'm like, yeah, you know, I don't want to I don't want to, you know, like, cause maybe I have a medium instep and somebody's got a high instep, and you know, who knows? But the bottom line is it's challenging to sort that out. And so I think you end up having a lot of conversations and, you know, ultimately like trying to figure out how to synthesize that into some sort of like consistency, like, because you know when you're buying a several $100 pair of shoes, you want to make sure you're spending good money in the right way and all that. So
Yeah, I mean and I don't know, I mean hopefully so like with sizing questions for me, even when I like am curious about sizing, um I always kind of like take everything with a grain of salt, and now that I'm really at least I feel like I'm pretty like confident in knowing
yeah,
like what fits
yeah,
me well. So I'll kind of even when I'm like talking to a shoemaker, if they're like, "Oh no, like you don't need an adjustment on your instep," I'm like, "Well, I've heard that before, and like let's
mm,
just like make a small one because like if it's too snug there, like it's gonna be really painful. So like I won't wear it.
yeah,
Let's just like do it." And I think a lot of that, unfortunately, there's not an easy solution for. But I think at the same
yeah,
time, it's just the more people that you can talk to and hear different perspectives on it or just different experiences, I think
yeah. It
will help
goes.
to maybe like figure out how you should approach it with like the experiences that you've had and stuff. But
Well, I kind of
um,
want to bring up here, like, for example, like I went on this bit of a, not with sizing, but in terms of leather. Like when you announced the GMTO with Solgarb and started talking about this navy Zug leather, and I was looking at the Zug leather, and I'm like, that looks like Scotch green, but like, what the heck is Zug
uh,
leather?
yeah,
And I started like looking around and trying to figure out a deep dive into like, what's the difference here? Like, you know, every company that makes leather, every tannery has like their own version of Scotch grain, and I just found it like, okay. So I reached out. I kind of put a post up on Instagram like, what is this? Like, you know, it was a Bontoni leather, and you know,
yeah,
like
I
it's
saw
kind
that.
of funny. Yeah, Jesper and a couple other people who kind of were on the in the know kind of made some. I think the Sons of Henry, Tom from Sons of Henry reached out, and it was actually quite helpful to kind of get their perspective on things and kind of understand it. So David, what is Zug leather?
All right, yeah. Where is it?
You got the
Hang on.
Zug? We might as
There,
well talk about leather.
yeah, here it is.
Maybe we can standardize some leather knowledge. Oh, look at that! Boom. So for those of you who are watching later on, I'm actually I'm very interested in the GMTO, but I'm not sure I'll be able to join it for various reasons that have to do with my kids' tuition to school. But it is Zug. That is Zug leather. That's a it's a Horween leather, right? This particular version of it.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding and talking to Lorenzo from Soul Garb, and this is I would say it's not unique to Zug leather, but I think like this is just unique to leather in general. Is that it could be the same raw material and it could have the same texture, but just the finishing or the tannage or retannage pushes it
Mm,
into a different. So like my understanding
yep.
is like this is Scotch grain. It's just been
Yes.
tanned differently to
Interesting. See, I
to
never have
create
had
the Zug leather.
that is fast. Like I've never, like it takes having this conversation to understand. Like, okay, it's Scotch grain, it's an embossed leather, but its tannage is different than. I mean, is and it just like I've seen your videos show a couple times of like, hey, I've heard different people say like Zug leather is more water resistant because it's like somebody described it on some actually a subreddit as like a waxed Scotch cream, and I'm like, well, is that really what it is, or is it just a weatherproof? Like, is it like a weatherproofed Scotch grain, or like? But clearly, there is some reason why it is not um, as as common of a leather you come across. Like, I
Yeah.
think it comes with a premium versus Scotch grain. When I normally think of Scotch grain leathers, I'm like I don't mean to bash Cobbler Union or Allen Edmonds or others like that, but it's sort of like a starter grain leather for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, and this is something a little different, and so it's something that I was just kind of curious about, like, But hey, that tells me a lot that is a Scotch grain that has a different tannage and that gives it different properties.
Yeah, I mean
That's kind
it's
of cool.
and I we can wrap it up. I know we're at time or over it, but it's similar to hatch grain. So hatch
My
grain
wife
is
isn't back yet, so I'm okay for the
ah
moment.
cool. Well
She may
so
look at me funny if she comes in. She hasn't come
that
in yet, but
yeah,
I'm
that's what
sure
I was
she'll be
saying.
okay.
I saw you were like looking and I was like, all right, we
I'll
gotta
be like, honey, I'm being an
save Ashley.
internet star right now. Like
Yeah,
it's
so
okay.
the
5 people are watching. Okay, like, and who knows how many later.
yeah,
She's not.
hey, we've
She,
gotten
I wouldn't talk
I
about.
said there's been a lot of I think a lot more activity in this video, but I think the more we do it. So
Yeah,
but yeah, I was gonna say it's like a hatch grain. So when I was asking the guys from Ashland Leather and I was like, is hatch grain chrome or veg tan? And they were like, well, it depends on the hatch grain. Like hatch grain is really just the texture.
it's just
Scotch
a
grain
texture.
is just the
Yeah,
texture. But
it
then you could
doesn't.
have
That
chrome,
being
you
hash
could
green
have
doesn't make it
CXL. You could have
Yeah,
CXL hatch grain and
as a hatch
CXL
green.
Scotch grain.
Why has no one
Just
done that?
it's just the
Yeah,
tannage. No, so sorry, it's just the texture, but the
yeah.
actual tannage is what like
Well,
makes
we
it
see this a
leather, but
lot.
then makes it a specific leather.
What's sort of like the Russian reindeer hatch grain that people are all kind of jumping
Yeah,
onto, like Horween's got a version, Annonay's got a version. The most famous one is the JF and J Baker one, which is probably
PB
maybe the
and
most
J.
desired one. PB and J Baker and all that stuff. And that's my wife.
Yeah,
And yeah, and like they're all different. I think one of them that I have is a veg tanned hatch grain, and most of them are chrome tanned. So
yeah,
what you get out of that is what you get out
right.
of it, I guess.
Yeah, but I think like that's the thing. So like hatch grain, Scotch grain, it's just the texture, and then
Yeah,
Zug
yeah,
leather is just like a water resistant version of it, or close to water
yeah.
resistant. I don't know, but
And what
um,
makes that one particularly unique, you said, is the color of it. Like it's the way it's sort of
yeah.
dyed,
So
I guess.
navy. Lorenzo said that he's this is like the only navy Zug, or maybe the only navy Zug that was still available, and it was in like the Horween archives for centuries. No, not centuries, like a year, and then it took him like a year to get it from them.
Yeah.
But I think like Zug leather is out there. It's just that if you want navy, this is
You can, yeah, you can get this specific version of it.
yeah,
But yeah, like that's exactly the type of information I would love to be able to data mine more. And like, like I think both of us, as we've sort of talked about, it may be worth doing a separate, video on this, is like what it means to appreciate some of the finer sort of high quality, well produced things. Like I know you're into watches. Obviously I'm into cameras and shoes. We cross over with shoes, but there's
yeah,
a sort of realm. I was talking to other people about this, of like, we all have different things we appreciate, and I think there's a group of us who all appreciate, like handcraft is not quite the right word, but like well made things, I guess.
yeah. I think there is some. I guess it's just the appreciation of like a crossover of functionality, but like an art or just a skill in how you actually make something that's functional but
Yeah,
really beautiful to look at as well. And like watches, shoes, camera gear, like that, all that kind of stuff, um, kind of has that balance of it. Because if it
yeah,
doesn't, it's not as like there are ones that aren't as balanced. They're missing one or the other, but it's where you find that perfect balance that I think makes it more special than other stuff. So
yeah. One thing that's interesting, we kind of reflected on this in an earlier iteration of this discussion, is like what it like when somebody's getting started on the shoe journey. I've had this conversation recently, with a couple people who are like essentially where I was 2 to 3 years ago, where they were just kind of getting curious about welted shoes, and are trying to sort of make their way, and like ask me about like Meerman, or ask me about Allen Edmonds, and I was sort of like giving them advice that you gave me years ago, like, but kind of feeling like I was at the time I wasn't ready for that advice because I didn't want to spend like lots and lots of money
yeah,
on stuff. And so I think that it's just another area where you're like trying to figure out how to like find these sort of spaces of like, what does well made mean? Like, does it mean just literally a machine is stitching a shoe together, or does it mean like somebody's literally like, throwing every stitch by hand, like Lee Trung from
yeah.
Ichii, who's literally like every stitch is a hand stitched stitch.
He,
You
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, he gets carried
Shout
away
out
with
to
it.
Lee.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's like, I don't know how, like it sounds like the guy has a full time job in like whatever he
tech.
does, and
I think
software
he's
engineer.
IT. Yeah,
Yeah, and then he like in the evenings and weekends he's just making shoes, like
just sewing
absolutely
leather
great
together by
shoes.
hand.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Like for me, like that's well made now. Like it sounds weird, but like it's why I love the Indonesian
Yeah,
bootmakers and all the the Flame Panda types. So these guys who are like small houses of like, just a group of like between 1 and 10 people who are like sitting down and like assembling incredibly well put together shoes, and most of them by hand, some of them using some machine work. But it's, to me, like that I get into that, even if the quality might be variable between like that versus like a Macariello. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there are different use cases, different categories, all that kind of stuff. I think it's more so like, is the amount of work or the amount of craft that is put into it, does that match up with like what the use case or what the application of the shoe is? So like,
Yeah,
if you look
for
at a
sure.
casual shoe, like a mock toe or something, like they're not gonna do like, I don't know, 18 inches, that or 18
Yeah,
inches, 18 stitches per inch. Like yeah, like it's just all within
18
reason. Like
inches. Ooh,
what is the
18 inches per
applicable?
stitch. I have a couple people I could sell on the 18-inch per stitch shoe.
What
I
I
can.
don't even.
I'm sure you're. I think we're probably thinking about the same people, too.
Yeah, but like yeah, it's I guess that's where it is. I mean, I'm just looking at like the pair from Mecariello, like the Capri ones, right next to
Yeah.
a pair from Acme, and it's like there's obviously a different level of attention to detail, but like the Capri line is not supposed to be like the highest level of finishing.
No,
It's
no, it's
more
a more
casual and it has a more
casual.
like utilitarian functional
Yeah,
aspect to it. So like I think the
and I
same
know
thing
you've
with
told me
other
like there's
makers.
people who've been like disappointed by like a Macariello Capri because they're expecting a like Aurum level or an Argentum level or something, but at the same time you're getting a very high quality
These were
pair of
like they were
shoes.
like $500 or something.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
right? Isn't that what they
yeah,
were?
yeah, around there, somewhere in that range,
Right,
five
that's
six hundred.
crazy. With they were
Yeah,
hand stitched outsoles, like
yeah, yeah. No, I mean,
yeah, I mean it's
incredible. That's the other thing. Like I've talked to like I said, I've had a few of these conversations. Is like what makes a shoe elevated. Like you guys all, I mean, you, at this point, you definitely know I'm like a big fan of Winston,
Yeah.
because the price to value, we're all I think looking for value, right? At the end of the day, we like nice stuff, but we still want good value for what we're getting. Like, and I have a tough time justifying or ever being able to justify a pair from like Hiro Yanagamachi or Yohei Fukuda or even guys like Daniel Wegan or these guys who are like, they're making beautiful shoes, but you're paying like a lot for them. And it's not to invalidate them, but like when I go to somebody like a Winston, I'm seeing a lot of the same features that might be featured or like put together in a bespoke pair, but like, obviously with a custom, like a stock last or whatever.
Yeah.
So you're kind of making some concessions, but like at a much more palatable price. So,
Right.
it's just,
Yeah, I mean, there's a great, just like a good example that I had the other day with, I forget his name. He's on Instagram. It's like the denim
Denim
dentist.
Dentist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jeff. I think his first name's Jeff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so like he was reaching out to because he was like trying to get in contact with Acme to get a pair of bespoke shoes
Yeah.
made, and they're doing like they're obviously able to do it.
Yeah.
But then he saw a pair from Sirianosi. I don't
Yeah. Yeah.
awful,
Yeah. From Japan.
awful
Yep.
pronunciation, but I think we probably, if you know who they are, you would have known like who I was trying to pronounce
Yeah.
there.
Maybe
So
or one of the, yeah.
yeah, and I had reached out to them a few months ago, and we just couldn't get on the same like wavelength of like communication and finding
Yeah.
a balance of like what I wanted and what they could actually do. Um, but then he reached out to him and he was like, I want to get this George boot in like a bespoke last, and they were like, oh, well, we can only do MTO, we can't do a bespoke internationally or overseas, and that George boot is only like in person fitting, so it's like some of
Yeah.
the higher like I don't know if Daniel
Yeah.
Wiegand would even
Yeah.
be able to do an
No,
order
no, he probably
remotely,
needs
or like
he
some of
might
the
not feel
makers you just have to
comfortable.
be in person.
Well, we've seen this. I think we've both talked about this offline. Is like certain quote bespoke makers are willing to like, like do ready to wear stuff, but like others are like, they have a tougher time because they're like, hey, I can't stand behind the quality of the product as I'm
Yeah,
charging this price because it's going to take a custom fit and fitting shoes multiple times over, and you're going to spend like 4 to 5K on something like that, and you're flying to Japan to meet the dude to get the thing done, so you're talking about like a huge investment. And then there's others who are like, are like maybe seeing it as a profit option of like, hey, I can make a ready to wear shoes. I charge 4 or 5 thousand for a bespoke, so a ready to wear is going to be 2,000. And for
yeah,
them, that might make sense. I think for others, they're literally like, I'm just going to make literally all I'm going to do is MTO. Like Winston's much more comfortable with MTO because they've got stock last. They can do some gentle modifications, but they're not
yeah.
going to completely. Caio Torres, who's the guy I've mentioned a couple
Yeah,
times. He like took a stock last and he modified it for me. Like he's basically I had to do all my measurements and he like double checked it. We videoed it and all the stuff, and he's literally built a custom last for me. So
yeah. I mean, I think like that is so like there. I guess and I know we can wrap it up because I
I
know you
yeah,
gotta shoot.
totally.
But that's what I was gonna say. Like I think like there's a level of Um, just because like bespoke is like the highest level, but if you don't need a bespoke shoe, it doesn't make it the highest level then. Like
No.
if you don't need that and you can do like made to measure, or you don't even need made to measure, you just MTO, like whatever the highest level is that like you need, like that's it. Like it doesn't make it any
Yeah,
less, especially when you get shoemakers like Mecariello that do a bespoke level construction on stock last, or Acme, like
yeah. I think
you're
that's why
getting the
we
same
talk about it
shoe.
so much. I
Yeah,
think for us and maybe our audience, that's like where most people are happy to top off. Like
right.
they're like, hey, as long as it fits my foot pretty good, like, I don't need bespoke because honestly, I'm getting 95% of the experience and pride of ownership
And
that I
who
would
has
get.
2 years to wait?
Yeah,
Well, we
like
I guess I've waited 2
some
years
do,
to see
some
how it
do, and I
was.
get that. My feet have changed a lot, so I got to be
Yeah,
careful
that's
with
a
that.
fear I have with, the shoes from Yim. Like, I gave
Yeah,
him my measurements, and it's already been, like, 6 or 7 months.
yeah. And depending on the time of year, depending on what time you measure, depending on like weight changes, exercise, fitness, whatever.
Are you trying to say I've gained weight?
No, man,
No,
I aspire
no,
to be
no, I'm kidding.
my younger self aspires to be you. Let's just put it that way.
No, I mean,
And
but
I'm not my younger self.
no, I get it for sure. Like I can tell, um, especially like during the summer, like when it's more humid. Like
Yeah,
sometimes I
a
just have
summer
to
fitting might
go
be
with what
different.
shoes fit.
100%, like, like a more accommodating shoe, like, yeah, in the summer, like
Yeah,
when I came back from traveling just recently, my legs were like I'm in my 40s, so like I had a little bit of swelling for a couple days that like the shoes fit a little more snug. I was like, damn, this is I gotta be careful about like I'm not getting that old, but like I think the bottom line
yeah,
is that there's a lot of variation there. So if you're waiting 2 or 3 years for a pair of shoes, like you
you gotta
have to
take that into
accept
account.
that even bespoke might not be a perfect fit for the
Yeah,
circumstance. So for me,
it's a good
that
point.
works out to somebody like Winston or Macariello being sort of my go-tos.
Yeah,
Like I just think that they're awesome because you can really customize and again, hopefully as a community we can support each other, like the conversations you and I do have somewhat semi-consistently with people who are like, hey, how do you go through the sorting process? Hey, what's the fit look like? Hey, I'm into this thing, or that thing, like I like boot lasts, or I like low end steps or whatever, and you can
yeah,
kind of like sort of help each other a little and crowdsource it. But it's still a challenge with the way that Instagram and everything else is these days.
yeah. I was gonna say we got a little off target, but I think we were all
Yep.
talking like it was all related, and I think
Yeah,
hopefully I'll throw the Discord in there, and hopefully we can start getting that a little more active. But we can wrap it up
and I and I
well
would
done
say
with the rest
just
of this evening.
maybe even encourage people who like get to the end of this video, if you have things you want to hear us talk about, because I think we both have lots of things we're interested in talking about, but we also want to make it
Yeah,
relevant to people who view it. So if you leave a comment or whatever, and that way we can kind of get an idea of what's
sure.
like the general interests out there. Like I'm interested right now in like you know natural grain leathers. Like I'm just curious what's out there and what people are doing. So that would be an interesting topic for me.
Yeah,
But I don't know if
that's a
that's
good
into
point.
every. Yeah, might be a good one, right? Like it's
Yeah,
versus emboss or like emboss grain leathers, or like, hey, let's talk about every hatch grain out there and which ones are better than the other. Like
right.
all
Or
that.
just
We would just
understanding
ask.
like with the
Yeah,
like, is there a benefit to like not is there a benefit, but what is the benefit to having it naturally doing
yeah,
something that's a natural texture other than just being able to say like that's a natural texture. Like there's
yeah,
always like a
totally.
little bit of a but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. So anyway,
definitely throw a comment in
we got some
there
topics.
if you have a
Yeah.
question or a
So
topic
yeah,
for us.
definitely. Yeah.
Save us some
Awesome,
time.
man.
Awesome. Yeah. It was good catching up. Hopefully you guys
Always.
enjoyed it. We'll see you soon.
Awesome. Take
All
care,
right.
guys.
Thanks.
See ya.